Welcome everyone, I'm Grace Kuriakanja and this is Africa Matters. Now leaders from Commonwealth countries are set to appoint a new Secretary General when they meet in Samoa this month. And this time round, it's likely to be an African. We find out what that could mean for the continent and the global club. The Commonwealth of Nations makes up a quarter of the global landmass and takes about 2.7 billion people. African nations say it has helped amplify their voice, giving them an additional platform to lobby major partners and institutions. The Commonwealth Games, held every 4 years, also offer athletes from member countries a chance to sharpen their sports skills. But is it still relevant to Africans? We sent our correspondents in South Africa, Rwanda and Nigeria to find out.
I'm outside South Africa's parliament. In 1961, the apartheid government withdrew from the Commonwealth. Now, in 1986, Commonwealth leaders adopted a program of action against the apartheid state. This included economic sanctions. They also had a ban on all agricultural products, a ban on any promotion of tourism, and also a ban on banks that had any dealings with the South African apartheid state. In 1994, the African National Congress came into power. The new government quickly rejoined the Commonwealth and has been a staunch supporter of the Commonwealth. But South Africa says for the Commonwealth to remain relevant, it has to listen to the voices of the global South.
We think that the presence of the Commonwealth and the involvement of South Africa in the Commonwealth is to accept to be a puppet of the crown, largely because one of the preconditions of being in the Commonwealth is for you to accept, or a member state to accept, that the head of the Commonwealth will always come from the crown. So this is just another glorified management of the former colonies.
Now, South Africa says, with Africa being a third of its 56 members, the new Secretary General is likely to come from Africa. They want the new Secretary General to really focus on development issues, but for instance also deal with the high unemployment rate in Africa. They do believe that the Commonwealth is still relevant in this day and age.
One testament of the impact of the Commonwealth in Africa can be seen in South Africa today, but it started with the election of the Nigerian national Emeka Anyaoku as the third Secretary General of the Commonwealth in 1989, the first African to attain such feat. His 10-year tenure was praised by many for his role in the democratic transition in countries reeling from coups, civil wars, and racial discriminations. His contributions helped in the dismantling of the apartheid system in South Africa and the return of his home country, Nigeria, to democratic government.
So Nigerians look up to Commonwealth for a lot of assistance, especially in this era where there's economic meltdown. So a lot of assistance in terms of economic development, trade, commerce, and exchanges in several forms can be beneficial to Nigerians especially.
We not say good or bad, because most of the African nations, their own policies and their leaders, they are not even pleasing their own people. In fact, they want to cut away from the Commonwealth nation, and all that the benefit of the Commonwealth nation, it goes to them instead of going to the masses.
This year's Commonwealth Summit comes at a crucial time for many African nations, a time where Africa is being increasingly contested by the US and China for influence.
Rwanda joined the Commonwealth in 2009, becoming the second country in the world to be part of the Commonwealth without being a former colony of Britain. This happened due to a variety of reasons. One of them was the aim to boost and promote the political and economical reforms in Rwanda, promote capacity building, cultural ties, and global networks. In 2022, Rwanda got to host the Commonwealth meeting right here in Kigali, where different heads of states from different parts of the world got to attend.
Well, I think as a country, what it means is just moving forward. It's moving forward, it's opening up to a new world, it's being part of a new organization which presents so many opportunities.
The association is made up of 56 members from Africa Asia, the Americas, Europe and the Pacific. 21 of its members are from the African continent, and most of them opted to stay even after gaining independence from the British rule. In 1926, the British Commonwealth of Nations was formed with the decolonization of the British Empire. It was agreed that members would be treated as equal and pledge allegiance to the king or queen. In 1949, the word British was dropped and allegiance to the crown was removed. 8 countries then formed the modern Commonwealth, including Australia, Canada, India and South Africa. In 1961, South Africa withdrew from Commonwealth after pressure from member states against its apartheid policies. It rejoined in 1994 after holding democratic elections. At the time, Nigeria's Emeka Anyaoku was serving as the organization's 3rd Secretary General from 1990 to 2000 and the first African to hold that office. In 1995, Nigeria's military government was suspended for the execution of writer Ken Saro-Wiwa. 4 years later, the suspension was lifted. Zimbabwe was also suspended in 2002 after flawed elections. It then withdrew from the body the following year. Gambia withdrew from the Commonwealth 10 years later, saying it will never be a member of a neo-colonialism institution, but it rejoined in 2018. And in 2022, Togo, a former French colony, became the Commonwealth's 56th member state. All right, let's hear more from Lebohang Peko. She is a senior research fellow and political economist. She joins me from Johannesburg, South Africa. Lebohang, thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we discuss who is running for the top job, who is running for the seat of the Secretary General for the Commonwealth, is the Commonwealth still relevant in today's world, or does it have A, credibility issues and B, visibility issues?
Yeah, very good questions to begin with. I think we need to, of course, start with where the Commonwealth comes from, which is a constellation of former colonized colonial subjects of Britain. And as some people have called it, Empire 2.0. And this is seen by the ways in which, for example, many British companies control about £1 trillion worth or dollars worth of African resources, including gold, diamonds, gas and oil. And of course, they're also subject to liberalized, quite extractor-friendly corporate tax holidays and a very creative, imaginative system of tax havens, which are primarily located in other Commonwealth countries. But one of the questions that's always been raised is that there's a complete lack of reciprocity. So many African countries, former Asian colonies like Pakistan and India do not have, and of course across the Caribbean, cannot, of course, govern their economic relations with the UK in the same way. I think also when you say visibility, the question is visible where? So certainly for contemporary young people, the moment that the Commonwealth became visible was when the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth, passed on. I think it's now 2 years we're looking at, and that was when the conversation about what the Commonwealth can potentially look like after that would then look like. And of course, as soon as that began to happen, Prince Charles, now King Charles, was immediately announced and pronounced as the head of the Commonwealth in ways that many people found extremely problematic, undemocratic, and of course very imperial. So that was for the first time for many people where the visibility of the Commonwealth emerged, but in a very difficult and contentious way. And lastly, to say that, of course, being a Commonwealth citizen doesn't mean much in terms of movement of people. And we have seen, the migration, the global movement of people, again, is very one-sided. It's very difficult for people with Commonwealth passport to access the United Kingdom with ease. And then, of course, the ease with which British people can access many so-called Commonwealth countries is completely different. So that for all these reasons, the visibility and the viability have been in question for quite some time.
Right. So, Lebohang, in light of that, there are 3 candidates vying for this top seat from the Gambia, from Ghana and Lesotho. Let's take a closer look. Lesotho's Senator Joshua Setipa pledges sustainable development, inclusive growth in international trade, and strengthening the participation of underrepresented groups. Honorable Shali Ayokor Bochwe from Ghana also promises to strengthen democracy, Commonwealth values, and aims to build resilience for stagnating economies and surging youth unemployment and climate disasters. While the Gambia's Dr. Mamadou Tangara intends to deepen bilateral relations between member states, increase trade, mitigate global, and translate the Commonwealth's human rights policies into actions. What is the main issue, according to you, that they must address, that the incoming SG must address?
Gosh, I think the one is to be very frank about the history and the toxic history that the Commonwealth actually represents for many people across the world, for the billions of people who are former Commonwealth, Commonwealth subjects, as it were. Secondly, what this history represents today. So the one is the kind of trade agreements that are completely asymmetric. We recognize that 30 billion pounds leave African shores, for example, whereas which is far more than what comes onto our shores in aids, in remittances, and so on. So to really rethink and to radically reimagine a much more democratized Commonwealth, which understands that this is a 21st century world. This is 2024, not 1900, for example. And thirdly, of course, to think about how the Commonwealth can play a role, especially where several regional organizations on the continent are having their own challenges. So we've seen what is happening in the Sahel region, where several of the countries there have pulled out, Niger, Mali, Equatorial Guinea have pulled out of the ECOWAS and are kind of going it alone. And what kind of gap this potentially means for governance? What is the kind of international relations footprint that the Commonwealth might want to have in the light of having an African-headed leadership? What does that look like, and how does that influence global international relations? And of course, what does new international relations look like in 2024 versus 1924, for example?
Right. And you started by mentioning history and the historical injustices, if I would be precise on that. And I want us to talk reparations, because do you think it's time for the United Kingdom to reckon with its colonial past in terms of paying reparations, perhaps to even attract more members, I beg your pardon, to the organization or to the association?
I don't think that more membership is the issue. I think the issue of reparations should be separated from that, because if it's used as a recruitment drive, then that's quite cynical and really against the ethic of repair. Reparations is about expressing sorrow, expressing deep remorse, and it's also about, of course, a corrective measure. So I think the reparations debate has been on the table for decades, and of course, gathering momentum. Not only the United Kingdom, as you know, of course, France, Belgium, and many former colonial powers having these reckonings. The United Kingdom has been very reluctant to fully apologize. They have expressed regret. They have been slightly sorry. They have been remorseful. But of course, with an apology then has legal implications and has socio-political implications. It's fair to say that for many people, for example, watching the coronation of King Charles and I guess Queen Consort Camilla, if I'm getting my terminology correct, was quite jarring. The jewels that were on their heads. We know that many of those jewels come from South Africa. We know that many others come from India, and that they were taken by force. They were not gifted. So, I mean, we have a visceral image of the past still with us even now, and the lack of accountability literally being paraded around at the apex of the British royal family. So the reparations debate has been on the table, and it needs to be one that not only is a debate, but the United Kingdom needs to see how they're going to begin to to reckon with a growing discomfort and an impatience from many African and Caribbean countries, as well as Australia and New Zealand, the indigenous people of Australia, New Zealand, and India as well.
Right.
It's no longer popular. It's no longer fashionable to be an imperial power that is unaccountable. This whole notion of never explain, never apologize, and so on. That's a very quaint, ancient oddity that in an international world that is multipolar just has no place.
Right. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lebohang Peko there, a senior research fellow and political economist. Thank you for your time and contribution. Still to come here on Africa Matters.
I'm Henok Tasfai in Addis Ababa, where excitement is building around a major economic milestone. I find out what the launch of Ethiopia's long-awaited stock market could mean for the future of the country's economy.
To West Africa now, where japa is the code word used by Nigerians migrating to Europe to seek greener pastures. But it seems that some of them who have either made it to Europe or are on the verge of crossing continents are voluntarily heading back home. Mercy Apan brings us this report from Lagos.
This Burak flight has just landed from Libya. Many step off the plane with mixed emotions. A woman rolls on the ground to celebrate her return.
We've had up till date about 23 flights that have come back from Libya. These flights, they convey Nigerian nationals who have attempted to migrate to Europe through the Mediterranean route or through the Sahara Desert route. So they use irregular means. Most times they are smuggled, they walk through smugglers, or some of them are trafficked. And they use this regular route from Nigeria to Niger and find themselves in Libya.
According to a 2021 World Bank survey, 50% of Nigerian youths want to leave the country, seeking a better life. In 2017, Chilen Nozu was one of them. Now, she runs a small organization that preaches a message to Nigerians about taking the same route she tried to take to Europe.
I reflected on quite a lot of things because from Nigeria to the point where I got to the Mediterranean coast, I had a lot of challenges. I lost my personality. I lost quite a lot of things. I wasn't sure what I was even doing. I struggled to fit into the environment, the language issues, just quite a lot of things happening at the same time. So I had to ask myself exactly what I wanted out of this entire thing. What if I get to Europe and it gets worse?
About 40,000 Nigerians have returned home from other countries since 2017. More than 4,500 of them made the trip back this year alone.
I'm on the tarmac at the Lagos International Airport where 165 Nigerian voluntary immigrants have touched down. People here are calling these reverse japa, which means reverse escape or runaway. Among these returnees are Nigerian immigrants who made desperate trips to Europe for greener pastures but failed.
For some, simply missing home is a reason to return. When Utielu completed her education abroad, her home country began to call.
Coming from Nigeria, where we're very communal, you come out of your house, you greet your neighbor, you walk around, it was a very different type of lifestyle, right? And that was an issue for me in terms of my own type of personality. I didn't have a problem with, other races, with white people. No, not at all. Got on perfectly well. But there was just something about that feeling of missing home, of missing sort of that camaraderie that was just not there.
Nigeria has Africa's largest population and is one of the world's top oil producers. Yet, the nation of more than 200 million people has struggled with corruption, economic mismanagement, a weak currency, and inflation. As Nigeria's inflation continues to skyrocket at an alarming rate and life becomes difficult for Nigerians, expert believes few are returning home.
Return, which is irregular migrant, which is very, very predominant now. It has to do with people who are failed asylum seekers, people who went on desperate journey in an irregular manner and have to come back as a result of frustration, dehumanization, and a lot of things. They had to take that decision because, it's not favorable to them.
As more flights with Nigerian migrants are expected to touch down, it is also questionable whether these returned japas will succeed in their home country. Mercy Apan, Africa Matters, Lagos.
To Guinea-Bissau now, whose territorial waters remain a primary resource, but foreign fishing vessels are depleting the country's reserves and ravaging the environment. The government says the fishing contributes about 4% of the country's gross domestic product, representing 40% of the national budget. But local fishermen in Guinea-Bissau find themselves struggling to make ends meet, as Maimuna Ba reports.
In the early morning heat and humidity, the main fish market in Bissau comes alive. It's maybe one of the poorest countries in the world, but the Atlantic Ocean of the coast is rich in fish. Usman Mane and his crew have just returned from 4 days at sea, but even with a decent catch, he earns about $3, so he still struggles to make ends meet.
We are so tired of Guinea-Bissau. I can't make any money worth my work. We use so much effort, but then we have so much expenditure and so many government taxes to pay.
Like many fishermen, Usman would like to export his catch, but there is no way to do so and he cannot compete with foreign trawlers, so he has to contend with the local markets.
This is the biggest fish market in Bissau. It is normally very busy. Everyone here is trying to get the best prices for their fish. And that means for traders here, it does not translate to much money at the end of the day.
Maria Mansi says life has become harder as the country is plunged by frequent coups.
The government has done nothing for us. We buy a lot of fish, but sometimes we don't even get customers. Many a times, we don't even cover our overhead.
But there is a looming threat.
They have the greatest fish stock in the region because of their natural resources and their mangroves, but that is under threat by foreign captains fishing illegally. One day, the people of Guinea-Bissau will no longer be able to fish in their territorial waters.
This fisherman agrees. He says that foreigners and their fake ships can go deep into the ocean to get the big fish. However, locals who don't have the equipment cannot. He hopes the government will protect them in the interest of fair competition. Maimuna Ba, Africa Matters, Guinea-Bissau.
To one of Africa's big economies, Ethiopia, which is set to launch its first stock market next month. After decades of operating under a closed financial system, the government is now opening its doors to new investment opportunities, both local entrepreneurs and foreign investors. But how much of the country is ready for this? Our reporter Henok Teshfire finds out.
Ethiopia's financial system has been largely closed off to private investment and foreign capital. But that's about to change. The Ethiopian Securities Exchange, ESX, is the country's first and only organized securities exchange. It aims to play a critical role in development and growth of the Ethiopian capital market.
We will be launching in the next couple of months. We've already signed a contract with our technology vendor. So the main function of the exchange is to present the trading platform for what I said earlier. So to connect investors with issuers or those needing capital. We're providing an easy-to-use platform that people can access on their phones, just like any other stock exchange in the world. So whether in New York or London or Nairobi, we're trying to match that level of technology.
Financial experts say the stock market will allow companies to raise capital, create jobs, and spur economic growth across sectors. Business leaders like Harish Kutari believes Ethiopia has long been missing out on the benefits of a functional capital market. He says his company is preparing to trade in the Ethiopian stock market.
Where we'll be able to be a part of, big companies who are a part of the Ethiopian Stock Exchange, and we can buy shares and we can trade shares and we can be a part of that entire movement.
Some see the launch of the stock market as a vital step towards economic modernization. Others caution that much depends on how well the market is regulated, the rate of inflation, as well as political stability.
So as the level of inflation becomes high, people or investors are going to invest in real asset, not the financial asset. And therefore inflation is one challenge potentially that is going to hinder or the success of the capital market. And the fourth one is about the political instability that that we are experiencing in Ethiopia. So political instability is a challenge because it reduces the confidence of investors. So if investors are not confident enough in terms of securities, probably they may not go for investing in not only in financial asset, of course, in real asset as well.
Ethiopia recently demonstrated its commitment to financial reform by floating its currency, a bold step toward economic liberalization. The country's first stock market is set to launch by mid-November, a key milestone in transforming the financial sector. But with soaring inflation and ongoing political instability, the question remains, will this move bring the investment and growth Ethiopia hopes for? Henok Tasfaye, Africa Matters, Addis Ababa.
That's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode or ideas on what you'd like us to cover on YouTube or on X using the hashtag Africa Matters. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Grace Kuria Kanja.